I've got a bit of a conspiracy theory about Terence Crawford, the WBC, and Zuffa Boxing and the Saudis. Recent events have led me to believe that there's actually a coordinated effort going on right now to try and make the boxing establishment as it is look as bad as possible, to try and show that there's a better way of doing things. And this better way might be better for some people, but not for everyone. In this video, I'm going to be diving into the ins and outs of what's just been happening with Terence Crawford, him getting stripped by the WBC over his refusal to pay sanctioning fees, what Zuffa Boxing, Dana White, and Turki Alalshikh are currently up to in America and how this directly impacts that. I'm trying to figure out who is acting intentionally here and who I think might have been set up. Hello everyone, and welcome back to A Guy Called Henry. I hope you're all doing incredibly well. Right before I jump in, guys, don't forget to like this video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're new. And get your comment in the comment section below. Let me know what you make of this entire situation. Finally, consider supporting the channel by becoming a member. My ability to remain impartial and give you guys my genuine objective view on what is happening in boxing hinges on me being able to fund this thing moving forward. So if you would consider becoming a member, it's only a couple of bucks a month and I'd really appreciate it. Now, this all began for me a few days ago. I shared something on Instagram, at A Guy Called Henry, by the way, if you do want to go and follow me. And I basically said I thought it was completely ridiculous that the WBC charged a percentage of the fighter's purse as their sanctioning fee rather than it being a flat fee. Now, this comment was in relation to the WBC convention, where Mauricio Suleiman had just announced that they were only charging a 0.6% fee of Terence Crawford's purse.
He moves up to super middle and makes the fight of the century, beats Canelo, makes $50 million or around that. The WBC absolutely is not going to charge 3% of such an amount. We made a very clear 0.6%, which is $300,000.
But the fact that they're basing it on a percentage means they can justify what would have been an astronomical $300,000 sanctioning fee. The problem with this is, of course, that it creates a conflict of interest for the governing body. It means that they are charging a fee based on a percentage, which means that the fee fluctuates based on how big the purse is. If the purse is bigger, the governing body makes more money, which is obviously a problem when you're a governing body that's supposed to be impartial, not have favorites, and isn't supposed to just put forward the biggest commercial high-value fighter to be the champion and then leave them unchallenged because they're making lots of money. If it was a flat fee, it wouldn't matter who was champion, they'd make the same amount of money every single time, no matter what, and nobody then gets protections. So what came out was that Crawford had refused to pay this sanctioning fee. It came out on the last day of the WBC convention, which I believe was on the 1st of December.
It's very sad, it is very complicated to have to vacate a title, to withdraw recognition of a champion.
Suleiman confirmed that they'd stripped Crawford, that he hadn't paid his sanctioning fees, and that he had offended the whole organization, essentially. Hadn't even said thank you to them for giving him the belt or something like that. Crawford came back with a incredibly strong rebuttal saying, "Who the F are you?
You got the green belt, which don't mean real belt is the ring belt, which is free, motherfucker. What are you talking about? You want me to pay you more than the other sanction bodies because you feel like you better than them. How in the world all the sanction bodies agreed to the same amount, but you sit your ass up there and say that I need to apologize to you? You can take the belt. It's a trophy anyway. The fuck am I paying you every time I step foot in the ring?
Now look, I get both sides of the argument here. On the one hand, you would say Terence Crawford knew that he was going to be fighting for the WBC belt, that he would be representing their organization if he won, and therefore sanctioning fees are something that come with this. The argument has been from Eddie Hearn and the other established promoters has been that you can't go for a steak dinner and then not pay for the bill if you've had the steak dinner. And I do get that. I suppose the difference is that Crawford referred to the fact that they were negotiating a fee for it, which makes me think that this wasn't established before he already fought for the belt. Now, on both sides, that's not how you do business. A business transaction works as such. I offer you X amount of money and then you agree to provide a service based on that amount of money. In this instance, Terence Crawford pays his sanctioning fees and he gets the service of fighting for the WBC belt, of all the prestige that comes with that, the fact that you are the WBC world champion, all the history and prestige that comes along with being that title holder. That is essentially what you're paying for. So from Crawford's side, I get it. He doesn't want to pay large fees for that belt, especially when they hadn't agreed them beforehand. From Suleiman's side, I also get it because I'm sure it would have been laid out at some point before the fight, you pay sanctioning fees. And apparently this wasn't the first time this had happened. Apparently when he fought Madrimov, there was some kind of WBC belt on the line. I don't even think it was the full world championship. And Crawford refused to pay sanctioning fees that time as well. Which honestly is a little bit confusing. Surely if Crawford already owed you sanctioning fees, if he'd done it once, then you kind of see the pattern there and you maybe don't get into bed with that individual again without establishing before the fight, these are the sanctioning fees, this is what you have to pay if you want the WBC belt to be yours. So anyway, I wrote this post and I shared my thoughts saying I thought it was ridiculous that they could charge this percentage fee. And someone replied to me, he's called Tay Crouch, he's a boxing coach here in Melbourne, he had a few pro fights himself in both boxing and MMA, Muay Thai, and he said to me, brother, you're missing the bigger picture here. And I thought to myself, what is he talking about? He was like, this is what I'm talking about. Go and do your research. So I looked into what he was talking about, and I think he's absolutely bang on. I think there's a lot more going on here. I think things are a lot bigger than just this one-off disagreement between the WBC and Terence Crawford. And so begins my explanation of why I believe there's a little bit of a conspiracy going on here. And what this idea fundamentally hinges on is an event that happened on December 3rd. Now, as we all know right now, the Muhammad Ali Revival Act is moving through Congress. It's been put forward by representatives, and they're trying to put it into US law to overwrite the original Muhammad Ali Act. I've made a whole video about this. If you want to go and understand in detail what this means, then you can go and check out that video. I'll put it in the description below. But it just seems a little odd that a day after or a day or two after the WBC decided to strip Terence Crawford, that this hearing was going to happen, that it was coming up on the calendar at a time when the established boxing order wants to look as good as possible, look as if they are the best option possible for fighters, they do something like this. Now, I'm not saying that Suleiman was necessarily wrong to strip Crawford, but I am saying that the timing was particularly inconvenient when you're trying to argue your point. And to read you a direct quote from Andy Foster, who is the executive director of the California State Athletic Commission, he was there to back the Revival Act, and he said that in coming years, many leagues would be set up, these UBOs. I'll explain that in a moment. But he said that UBOs would not charge boxers or promoters for crushing sanctioning fees. This quote coming just days after the WBC were reported to try and charge Terence Crawford $300,000 to represent their institution. Now, I'm not going to go into all the changes in the act, but just to quickly fill you in, a UBO is a unified boxing organization. It essentially means that you can run as a promoter, as a governing body, even a management company all in one. It means that there's no longer a separation of these organizations, meaning that fighter interests are no longer looked after by different parties. It's a potentially dangerous thing for boxing because it means they have all the power. Further to this, I don't think they're going to have to disclose the financials that are involved in their shows and things like that. So the comment that these things will get rid of unfair sanctioning fees is completely ludicrous because they'll be completely in control of the entire picture if you're fighting for their organization. There's definitely some positive things about them, but just focusing right now on this fact in particular. Now look, we all know that Turki Alalshikh, who is one of the backers of Zuffa Boxing, it's a partnership they've done with Dana White, they are the people that are driving forward this change, this amendment to the Muhammad Ali Act. And we all know that Turkey has a bit of a disdain for the current governing bodies. There's too many belts. We all know that. And these institutions that exist have not been run very well. I think that's fair to say. And we've seen physically Turkey reject the belts being on stage for the Canelo Skull fight in the ring after the fight when Crawford won. The Ring magazine belt was the very first belt put on his waist. Whilst the other belts were there eventually, he was also presented some mad-looking WBC Super Bowl-style ring by Maurizio Suleiman. I wonder if Crawford at that point knew he wasn't going to be paying his sanctioning fees, but that's a side note. The point is that the Ring magazine belt is the one that has been put front and center since the Saudis bought the ring and started doing these ring events. So what is the conspiracy theory I'm talking about here? Well, I think that the timing of things that happened between Terence Crawford and Maurizio Suleiman, it's very unlikely that it's a coincidence. It's very unlikely that it happened 2 days before this hearing because the Repeal Act actually moved through that part of the process and it will now be heard at a higher level, which means it's a significant step closer to becoming a reality. Now, Crawford and Turki Alalshikh are very close. I think they've referred to each other as friends. When Crawford talked about the negotiations between the two of them for the Canelo fight, Turkey wasn't involved because they were too close. They had to get different negotiators involved to work with Crawford on his end of the deal.
We went to the little back room, and we was there for like 9 hours.
Dang.
Going back and forth.
Dang.
You know, they not budging, I'm not budging. I'm in that mug like this. I'm like,
By yourself.
by myself. And they like, and they calling Turkey. He's not. I'm like, man, I just want to talk to Turkey. They's like, you can't talk to Turkey because he's your friend.
So they trying to protect Turkey from the friendship.
Yes.
Because he gonna give in.
Yes.
And there's been multiple times where Turki Alalshikh has said that Crawford is his favorite fighter. So I guess there's a couple of different options for how this has played out. You know, the first is that Crawford just remembers that he never used to get paid that much and every penny counts. And he's looked at this and gone, nah, I don't even want to pay you $300,000, even though he made an astronomical amount of money. I think it was like $50 million or something. He said, no, I don't even want to pay you that. Because not long ago, that would probably be in his entire purse. So it might just be that's the reality of the situation. However, I'm more in the camp of someone's got in his ear and said to him, don't pay that fee. Don't worry about the WBC. You shouldn't be paying that much money. Don't worry, the Ring magazine's got your back. Our belt's the only one that matters anyway, right? So it's not important. And I mean, if it was a deliberate and strategic move, it makes sense. You know, he's paid other sanctioning fees. He's still the predominant champion in that division. He hasn't just given up his belts. And the WBC, the green and gold belt, is probably the most prestigious in terms of appearance. The way they behave these days, they're not a particularly legitimate organization, and the way that they protect their champions, don't order mandatories and all that sort of thing. Their rankings, most of the governing bodies get up to stuff like that. But it would be the one, if you wanted to make an example of the current establishment, they'd be the one you'd pick because it is the most iconic looking belt, I would say. And so someone may have just got in his ear and said, keep the others, pay the sanctioning fees for those, we can negotiate them down, don't pay the WBC. And then I just wonder if something's happened during that WBC convention. I wonder if Crawford has been encouraged to send Suleiman a message, if a message has been sent to Suleiman by somebody else, one of Crawford's lawyers potentially, that has then triggered this response from Ritso Suleiman. The point here is, I don't know if Crawford's acting of his own free will, of his own free thought, uninfluenced by anyone around him, or if someone said to him, do this thing now, tell him now you're not going to be paying the fees, in order to bait Suleiman into coming out and stripping Terence Crawford for not paying those sanctioning fees. And this is the thing, if they were going to strip Crawford, they had to explain it, because you couldn't just strip the guy who just beat Canelo recently. We all know they don't order mandatories particularly frequently, so that wouldn't have been a good excuse. I do think here that Crawford has been told, don't pay the sanctioning fees, piss Suleiman off, and Suleiman's taken the bait just days before this hearing, when the best thing for Suleiman to do would have been to wait for the hearing to be over and then strip Crawford. It feels like there was a lot of pride, a lot of ego, and just general feelings being hurt in this decision, in this sort of knee-jerk decision, I would potentially call it, from Ritso Suleiman.
Y lo que él diga es cuestión de lo que él va a decir. No va a encontrar en el Consejo Mundial de Boxeo un rival para pelear, definitivamente no.
Or potentially it was planned all along, and actually it was just convenient that it happened just a matter of days before the hearing, but I'm not sure I really believe that, to be honest with you. So look, I'm not saying that Crawford was in on a grand plan. Maybe he was. Maybe they've said to him, you know, Terence, don't you think it's stupid that we have all these belts? Maybe he's actually a partner with them now, or in, you know, unofficial partner where he's helping them to create more prestige for the ring and diminish the other governing bodies. Perhaps that's the case. But in reality, I just think he's maybe been more manipulated here a little bit in his moves. He's been encouraged to do certain things by certain influential people around him, potentially. And for the WBC, they should know better than this. They should have known that this hearing was coming up, that they needed to work on their PR, their communications, to figure out what's the best way to present ourselves in light of this hearing coming up. We need to make sure that whilst, you know, our existence isn't threatened by this bill passing because we're still allowed to exist legally, but the best thing for them, the best thing for the current boxing establishment in terms of the governing bodies would be for UBOs not to exist at all. So to help the narrative that they're needed in boxing is something that is not beneficial to them. I don't understand why they haven't been more mindful of what was happening moving forward. So the Revival Act is gaining serious traction. It looks like it's probably going to pass eventually and become a thing. And look, my opinion is I don't even know if it's going to work, because boxing's not like UFC. It's not a young sport where it was just wide open for someone to walk in, create a league, and dominate the marketplace. Boxing already has so many established institutions that go so far back that it's going to be very, very difficult for Zuffa to create this league and then hang on to their best talents for the duration of their careers. There's nothing to stop them doing a few years, growing their profile, getting paid well from this Paramount deal, and then heading off with the current system and going and making absolutely ludicrous money. And perhaps that leads us to the logical explanation, which is that they're not done yet. Even when they get this Revival Act to pass, they may not be finished. It may be that they then move to establish that UBOs should be the only thing that exists within boxing. There's a lot going on here, guys. I don't know where this starts and finishes yet. I just know that we need to keep an eye on things. We need to try and look for what the facts are and what the truth is. I'm not accusing anyone of anything in this video. I'm just suggesting what the most likely reality might be. And as I see it, it's what I described. I should finally say my opinion on whether or not I think it's a good thing. Finally, I'll just say this. My final opinion is I don't think it's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing that Crawford didn't pay those sanctioning fees, but it does just continue to build that narrative that boxing is really messy. If the fees weren't agreed before the fight, then that's just absolutely mental to me. Why on earth would the WBC allow that situation where they're going into the event with it not being established what Crawford's going to be paying to represent the belt? And for Crawford, it works out quite nicely that it's not been agreed because you go, yeah, I'm going to get the belt. I'm going to then leverage the fact I've already got the belt to pay lower sanctioning fees. And if I don't like it, I'll let the belt go. He's actually done incredibly smart business here in that sense. But moving forward in his career, if he wants to become an undisputed unified champion in another division at middleweight, which is what everyone thought he was going to do, then there's a good chance that the WBC won't be part of that because of how much he's upset them in this process. But guys, get in the comments section below. Let me know what you think. Do you think that there's been some manipulation here? Do you think this is a conspiracy theory? Something that's been done to try and help this revival act get through Congress? Or do you think it's just a big set of coincidental circumstances? Thank you so much as ever for watching all the way to the end. And as I always say, on to the next one.